In Scotland, the river known as the Water of Leith cuts a charming path through Edinburgh to the city's port. It's an area that dates back to the 12th century. That's where a young spirits company recently opened a distillery that's both turning heads and forging new traditions for Scotland's national drink, Scotch whiskey. Rising nearly 9 stories, it's hard to miss the Port of Leith Distillery.
You know, you build a tall building, you kind of feel you've got to put a bar at the top.
Ian Sterling's shrine to whiskey.
Here we are in, well, the world's tallest distillery.
Sterling is founder and co-CEO.
So what we have here is our mill where we get our grain, that's the malted barley.
It's a top-down production process.
This is called grist.
With gravity doing some of the work.
So we let the liquid and the grain work their way down the building and get spirit out the bottom, basically.
Scotland's long history with whiskey production dates back to the 1700s, with the Port of Leith playing a crucial role.
In the late 20th century, it's estimated that as much as 90% of Scotch whisky passed through here. It was Leith where it was blended, it was bottled, and it was shipped out to the world.
How do you decide between being really true to that heritage, but also being modern enough that you'll grab an audience now in 2024?
Yeah, well, you know, we love all the tradition and heritage that dominates Scotch whisky, and there's so many incredible stories and so much to inspire us. But the reason we wanted to do this was to do something new. A real focus for us has been fermentation, because whiskey is essentially distilled beer. First you make a beer and you distill it into whiskey. And in making that beer, there's all sorts of choices to make. You know, what yeast do you use, what barley, how long do you ferment for, all these different things.
The distillery is a passion project Sterling dreamt up with Paddy Fletcher. Lifelong friends, both moved to London at age 18. Sterling working in the wine industry, Fletcher in finance. All along, sharing their love of whiskey.
One day when my wife was expecting our first child, and just almost as a distraction, Paddy and I said, why don't we have a go at making whiskey in our back garden? And she sort of let that happen. And it was during that process that we learned so much that we hadn't discovered, you know, having visited so many different whiskey distilleries. And we realized that there were so many things that had opportunities that we hadn't understood before. So it was really then we began to expand our horizons.
In 2014, the duo created their own wine and spirits company and began the long fundraising process.
The barrier to entry for starting a new Scotch whisky distillery is very high. You need millions of pounds to build a distillery, and then you need millions of pounds to make whisky, because you can't sell anything for years and years.
And you need the perfect spot, which they discovered in 2016.
We thought if we could find the right location, then maybe we could get visitors in our early years, and those visitors, those revenues could pay for the whiskey production and get us through to that point when we could make whiskey. And sure enough, eventually we found this site, and we are right next to the Royal Yacht Britannia.
Her Majesty's Yacht Britannia.
So anyone who's watched The Crown, anyone follower of the royal family,
my mind.
there we go.
You're reading my mind.
They will know that ship. You know, one of the most famous ships in the world.
She did not want to give up that ship.
Oh,
she wanted to keep sailing on that ship.
Absolutely.
It was too expensive.
There has always been a royal yacht going all the way back to King Charles II.
But had she not done it, we would not be sitting here today talking about this business. So we're very fortunate to have one of the UK's best visitor attractions right next door to us. So when we got this site, we knew that investors, you know, they might look at Paddy and I and go, I don't know about these idiots and whether or not they can make whiskey. But that site, that location will work for this business plan, and that's what got this started, essentially.
Beginning a 7-year design and construction process that would cost nearly $16 million. Earlier this year, it finally felt complete.
We opened here to the public in October last year, in October 2023, but it was only in January of this year, 2024, that Paddy and I had been in a meeting upstairs in our boardroom, and we walked out, and suddenly the whole building smelt of whiskey making, of fermentation. And that smell, just that moment, was so electric. You know, that smell was the moment we thought, we've done it. Here we are, we're making whiskey. And that was the dream come true.
Teach me, what are we going to taste today? I need to learn from you.
Absolutely.
Vaibhav Sood is head of whiskey operations. He led me through a tasting of New Make, the distilled spirit that will become whiskey once it's aged.
If you think about the whiskey making process as a very, very simple process, you use malt, which is barley, you use water, and you use yeast. Malt and water creates sugars. The yeast utilizes sugars to create alcohol and some flavor profiles, and these are very, very important flavor congener profiles. We distill them, concentrate them, and create new make spirit. That's what we're going to try and taste first.
Okay. It's really delicious already, if I can say that.
Absolutely.
The next new make, created with a Belgian ale yeast instead of one from Norway, a lab-born experiment to impact taste.
You see the
Definitely
distillness?
different. I can't tell you why it's different, but definitely different.
The reason for that is the yeast, and that's the very, very major thing that we have to notice here is how different types of yeast will create those distinct aromas. We call them primary flavors.
Last, a taste of sherry, a nod to the old sherry casks Port of Leith's whiskey is aged in.
All those really, really great spicy characters on it, but there's a hint of that creaminess in there straight away on the nose. And these are the things that are going to impact the casks that we will mature our whiskey in. So on the palate, one thing you straight away notice, it's not sweet.
Not at all.
It's called a dessert wine, but it's not sweet.
No.
So now we go into the still room.
Okay.
This is where the magic happens.
Sterling believes that attention to detail, along with years of research on everything from alcohol content to flavor, will set their Scotch whiskey apart.
We filled almost 1,000 casks already, which is amazing, really, and that's slowly maturing to whiskey.
A taste of what's to come. After all, making whiskey, especially in Scotland, is a long game, one that for Ian Sterling is worth the wait.
When will you have your first whiskey
Yeah,
that you
the-
get to put out?
The big question.
Yeah.
So we're anticipating about 8 years. So yeah, you've got to be patient in this game.
My God, do you?
Because you have to think, in almost generational terms. It's like planting trees. So you've got to be along for a very long journey. There'll be people running this business after me, enjoying the stuff that we're laying down right now, and that's the sort of way that you think with Scotch whiskey. So it's exciting.
So we have to wait along with them to taste the whiskey that they are right now aging. Two quick things. You have to age it at least 3 years and a day for it to be Scotch, which is Scotland's version of whiskey. But what they did do, what we have here, is gin from Linden Lime, which they created to sort of give their investors an idea of here's what we can do in this alcohol market. So it's their gin that they've created that while they're waiting for the whiskey, you get a little of this or the new make.
I've already had 3 or 4 sips, but I have to ask, it's pretty incredible what they've been able to accomplish thus far in terms of the investment in. But this is the big question. Did you get them to ensure that you will get some of that whiskey on the first one?
I'm pretty sure Vidya Singh, our producer, made
All
sure of that.
righty.